So imagine a government that claims to uphold human rights and international law, but simultaneously supports actions that violate these very principles. A government that turns a blind eye to ongoing humanitarian issues and aligns itself with forces committing several abuses. Sounds hypocritical, right? Well, that's exactly what's happening here in Australia today. And it's betrayal not only to the international law, but those who actually believe in justice and human rights. Welcome back to Lawishhh, where we're going to dive deep into this very controversial issue, but it should be discussed. It's a political issue that we all heard of. And just by way of background, my name is Enes. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and I think it's really deeply troubling issue, which is the Australian government's continued support for Israel despite evidence of violations of international law, and why their stance is particularly disappointing coming from a Labor government that once promised these better solutions. I used to vote Labor. I'm going independent for a reason. So let's start with some background. The 22nd of August 2024, over 100 Australian lawyers and legal scholars published an open letter to the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. I was also one of them. It wasn't just to him, but it was also the Foreign Affairs Minister, Penny Wong, and we got other ministers and other high ends of government. This letter sort of called out an arms and an energy embargo on Israel following the 19th of July 2024 advisory opinion by the International Court of Justice, which is the ICJ, which declared Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories illegal. The opinion was clear. Israel must withdraw its forces, settlement communities in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. It is where it's been operating this apartheid regime. This is not a new obligation. It was a reminder of decades-old international duties that states, including Australia, have continually violated. This advisory opinion should have been the biggest wake-up call for the Albanese government to align with Australia's foreign policy with international law and human rights. But instead of talking and taking a stand, our government chosen to ignore these obligations, continually support a regime that the ICJ and the international community have condemned. This isn't just disappointing, this is a disgrace. The lawyer's letter to the Albanese government itself didn't mince words. He pointed out directly that Australia was a member of the international community. It is bound by certain legal obligations due to the ICJ's finding. These include not recognizing Israel's authority over the occupied Palestinian territories, halting these economic, trade, investment relations that support this occupation, and the ending of any assistance that facilitates Israel's illegal actions. These are based on basic principles of international law. Australia is required to uphold them, yet our government continues to ignore it. In this letter, the lawyers have explicitly called for a comprehensive arms and energy embargo on Israel, covering their export, import, and also transfer of these weapons, as well as a military surprise like jet fuel. This isn't just doing the right thing morally, okay? It's a legal obligation. The ICJ's opinion detailed how various policies such as water management, infrastructure, planning, and land policies are integral to Israel's illegal occupation of these racial segregation annexes. Australia, therefore, must immediately suspend ties related to these areas. But has our government listened? Of course not. On the day of the ICJ's advisory opinion, the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, released a statement saying she completely sidestepped the ruling. Instead, she announced financial sanctions and travel bans just to 7 Israeli individuals in one entity, citing their involvement in the settler violence against the Palestinians. While this might sound like a step in the right direction, it is far from sufficient. The lawyers pointed out that Wong's response was inadequate because it failed to address the broader issue, the systematic and space-sponsored nature of Israel's occupation and apartheid policies. And now, let's be clear, the ICJ has found that the settler violence in the West Bank isn't just a result of rogue actors. It is a core component of Israel's occupation, their policy. So, targeting a handful of individuals, let's be honest, it does nothing to address the root cause. The Australian government response was a symbolic gesture, not only a meaningful action. If the Labor government truly cared about the justice and human rights, it would take a much stronger stance. one that aligns with the international law and the clear findings of the ICJ. The situation in Palestine isn't a bilateral dispute between Israel and the Palestinian people. It's a multilateral issue with very legal ramifications in all states, including Australia. The right to self-determination is a massive issue in international law, meaning its fundamental principles that states have an obligation to respect, yet they continue to support Israel's illegal occupation. Australia is not only complicit in this crime, but actively undermining the fundamental principles of international law. And let's not forget the human toll of this whole policy. 11 months into what many people calling now a Gaza genocide, the death toll has surpassed over 40,000 people, with thousands more unaccounted for. This ongoing blockade, the targeted bombings, the destruction of the civilian infrastructure, these are not actions of a state simply defending itself, but they are part of a calculated strategy to make life unbelievable for the Palestinians, a strategy that amounts to the genocide under international law. Yet, the Albanese government continues to turn a blind eye, even as evidence mounts these atrocities. What does this all move to disappointing, of course, on the Australian Labor government's history? In both 2021 and 23 policy platforms, Labor committed to recognising the state of Palestine. This was a clear promise to support the rights of these Palestinian people and to oppose the illegal occupation by Israel. Yet, since coming into power, the Albanese government has done this complete opposite turn. It has strengthened ties with Israel, ignored its own obligations under international law, and failed to take a meaningful action to end the occupation. This is not just betrayal to not only the Palestinian people, but to the Australian public who believed into the Labor's promise of a fairer and just better foreign policy. The Australian government actions, or lack thereof, send a very clear message to everyone. Profits and political alliance are much more important than human rights and international law. By continuing to support Israel's apartheid regime, Australia is complicit in the oppression of the Palestinian people. It's time for this Albanese government to live up to its original promise, to listen to legal experts and the international community and take a stand for justice. So, what can be done? It starts with holding our leaders accountable. We must demand that the Australian people, government, and everyone else must comply with its international obligations and take a stronger stance against Israel's actions. These are all illegal actions under law. This means imposing a full arms and energy embargo, ending all economic support that support the occupation, and calling for an end of apartheid state. This isn't just about politics. This is about standing up what's for right and for the principles of justice and human rights that Australia claims to uphold. Thank you for tuning into this Lawishhh channel. If you found this video informative, please share, like, and leave your comments about this decision and why you think the Albanese government has failed you. But if you want to answer any more questions, or if you want more videos on political stuff, please give me some ideas that you guys want me to address, and I will always try to make a video over it. So just stay informed, stay engaged, and let's continue this fair fight in this world. I'll see you in this era.